terms of an assessment, you can see this formula across the top here. What's our current staffing level? Who do we expect to leave? What do we expect to hire? That tells us what we have, kind of on the inside of the company. It's pretty straightforward. You analyze the inflows. Where can we get people from? Where are we getting people from? And the outflows. Where are people going? A lot of times, it's happened in my career when you promote somebody to a manager position or a director position. Don't forget, you just made a vacancy. Like, we have this idea that we kept this person, but in effect, in a lot of ways, we lost that person because they need to be replaced from wherever they were, whatever this particular skill set is. And there's a few ways to do that. So when you're in a talent surplus, that is, you have more people who are actually good than what you need. There's a few different options here you can think about. Hiring freeze is probably one of the most common. You try to take care of the people who are in your company first. You can reduce work hours or compensation. That's dangerous. Money is particularly affective driven. Once you hit $70,000 or $80,000 a year, it becomes to be much more about ego and feeling of worth rather than, can I keep my power bill paid? So if you reduce compensation, people say, well, I'm out. And who's likely to be out is probably your best employees. So anyway, but there are some options. In a talent shortage, you can see that, right? Voluntarily overtime, you can outsource certain components of whatever your production is, either a service or an actual artifact, a production. So anyway, there are different options at a macro level to manage variance in terms of talent supply. If you find yourself in a situation where you have a talent surplus, one of the toughest things that you'll have to do is listed on bottom here. It's called a RIF, or a reduction in force, or layoffs. This decision is usually made by the CHRO or the director of HR. A few things to keep in mind. You have to figure out right away, what's the work that we cannot go without doing? What's the most important work? And leave those employees alone. Number two, what are we going to need to actually execute our strategy? If we're going to lay people off, like, that stinks. You can look at the bottom one there. Pay attention to the survivors. Like, you're talking about people who have been maybe friends, maybe best friends, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, saying goodbye to their buddies. So it's a big deal, especially for who's left and who's still working. But you can see there's some good ways to do it, and there's also some ways to take care of people as they're walking out the door. Severance benefits. You pay people for leaving, for instance. So if I know that I have enough budget to keep John Doe on till the end of the year, might it be better to lay John Doe off at 6 months and give them 6 months worth of severance? That sends a better message to them going out the door, a better message to John Doe's friends, the survivors who are staying there, and arguably potentially more ethical, as well as placement services, resume development, stuff like that, stuff we can care for. Other ways, so that would be a talent surplus. In a talent shortage, this is a pretty common order in terms of kind of heuristics. Use overtime. You don't have to, for an exempt position, you don't have to pay extra for overtime. You have to pay it all for overtime, but most firms will. So if someone's working, I shouldn't say that, many firms will. So if someone's working over 40 hours a week, if they are an exempt position, you don't have to pay for it, but you can as a company. So what you might do is say, we don't have enough people. I'm going to go ahead and choose my best performers because they're going to get more work done than my average performer, my lowest performer, and I'm going to give them options for overtime if they want to do it. If that doesn't work, I ask myself the question, what work can I outsource? Or are there alternative work arrangements, telecommuting, working from home, stuff like that. You also have something that's constantly overlooked, and that is retirees. So people, there's more financial literacy today than there has been in the past, and so people are retiring at an earlier time. So if someone's retiring at 65 years old, well, chances are, depending on the position, they're still very capable and very interested in coming back to work. That's someone who already knows your processes, already knows your culture, already knows the products, the customers, the suppliers, So many times you can go back and try to grab those and entice them to come back to work, where they're pulling two paychecks. They've got their pension or their retirement, but they're going to go back to work and also pull another standard paycheck. Contingent workers, those are your contract labor. You can have more of those and do your best to reduce turnover. So anyway, there's a lot of options in a talent shortage. And again, this is at a macro level. This is where a CHRO would say, hey, look, we have more customers paying. We have more work to do than the people we have. Here are some things that we're going to do about it. And this is the list they might march down. Again, at a macro level, you might think about culture change. So when there is a replacement or a turnover of a CHRO or a director of HR, they can come in and they can kind of assess the culture and go, okay, here are the kind of things that we want to do or that we want to change in order to be successful, to execute our strategy, to ultimately accomplish the mission. Define the desired behaviors. That's going to depend on each individual role. Each function of the business will have different desired behaviors. But if you're all about Lean Six Sigma efficiency, then that's the model and you apply it to different functions. If you're about employee engagement, that's the model and you apply it to different functions in terms of what it looks like. You have role models. Those are usually at a higher level in the firm. That's what they talk about. There's a heuristic that says you get what you talk about. There is you get what you pay for, but there's also you get what you talk about. So those would be your role models, and of course incentivizing the right behavior. Some standard methods of cultural change. But from an HR specific perspective, at a director level, you're going to think about how do I define success in my role as an HR person, or for this HR unit, this HR function. How do I say, yeah, we're actually doing our job. We're doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. That begins with measuring success. You can't just walk into your boss and say, yeah, we're doing our job. You have to have evidence and data to back it up, and those are HR metrics. So here's maybe a couple examples of HR metrics. We'll look at the top left for a minute, HR to employee ratio. So if you have an HR to employee ratio of 1 to 50 versus 1 to 100, well, that means one HR person for every 100 employees. That's much more efficient than one HR person to 50 employees. So that's something you track. As the population outside HR goes up and down, as the population within HR goes up and down, you track it and you show it and you say, here's our target, here's what we're moving toward. Total HR staff, expenses per FTE. I mean, there's a million different metrics you can use. The question is, kind of harkening back to some of the original slide that I talked about with you have to speak the language that your boss, your CEO actually cares about, is you and that person sit down and you agree. These are the metrics that matter. This matters because you're basically creating an HR scorecard. You're saying, if we hit these particular metrics, whatever those are, then you and I, boss, we both agree I'm doing my job well. And if we don't hit these metrics, you and I, boss, both agree I'm not doing my job well. So in a sense, you're defining success of the HR function by whatever metrics like these that you ultimately settle on. That is a scorecard. Some people call it a dashboard. Some people call it metrics. And there's a million different names for it. But in a sense, you're basically saying, my role is to run the HR function of the business. Here's how you and I both agree on running. This is what running it well looks like, or this is what running it poorly looks like. And that's the scorecard. So again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. It's a very macro level discussion, but I kind of want us to be aware that there is, for the rest of the course, we're going to be thinking more to micro level. So that is employee rights and responsibilities, and how do we train and develop somebody? How do we hire them? What interview questions do we ask? Stuff like that. But there is this whole discipline that we're just kind of scratching the surface of right here. That's at when your shoulder is tapped and you're that person, or you're an entrepreneur or a manager at a smaller firm, so it ultimately falls on you. At some point, you have to be able to define, this is what we're trying to do. These are the behaviors that are going to make that happen. And then ultimately, here's how we're going to measure that. That is, these are the metrics. This is the scorecard that says, yeah, we're actually doing the right thing. And I think as terms of a primer, that'll get us to where we want to go for macro level HR strategy in chapter 2.